morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. I hope everyone had a wonderful and relaxing weekend. Welcome to another session of our Monday meetup, where each week we hope to cover relevant and useful information that will prepare you for being a student of Lakehead University. So today we have a very interesting and very important topic that will be discussed, which is all about academic integrity. Academic integrity is one of the most important pieces of knowledge that you will need to develop and possess as a new student of Lakehead U. It will guide the way that you conduct yourself on campus and within your classes and academics. So for those of you that were in the Transition Thursday webinar last week, you might remember me. My name is Laura Puttis, and I'm an international student advisor with the International Student Services Department on the Thunder Bay campus. So my role on campus is to provide specialized support to all international students prior to, during, and after your arrival to campus. And my role includes things like providing advising and guidance on issues related to academics, personal support when it comes to challenges related to housing, culture shock, employment, financial matters. So I'm here to talk if you ever need to talk, and don't hesitate to reach out to me if you need any form of assistance. So I am joined today by two colleagues, and first is Katie Fraser in the Aurelia campus, and I'll get you to introduce yourself, Katie.
Awesome. Thanks, Laura. Hello, everybody. Welcome. My name's Katie, and I work at Lakehead's Aurelia campus, which is in Southern Ontario, about 90 minutes from Toronto. So my role is similar to Laura's in that I'm here to support all of our current international students. You'll also hear from me if you're coming to the Aurelia campus, helping you to plan your arrivals, getting your information and forms submitted, things of that nature prior to you arriving on campus. So I look forward to working with all of you.
Thanks so much, Katie. And also joining us today and leading the presentation today is Joel Simmons. So Joel, I'll get you to introduce yourself as well.
Perfect. Thanks, Laura. Yeah, I'm Joel Simmons. I'm the manager of student conduct and case management at Lakehead University, which I know that title is a mouthful. But basically my job here at Lakehead is to oversee all things related to student behavior. So yeah, as Laura shared, I'll be leading up the presentation today. So I look forward to interacting and engaging with all of you.
Perfect. So before we begin the session, I just want to go over a couple of important things to remember throughout the session today. It will be recorded, so all attendees will have access to the recording after the presentation ends. And the information covered in today's presentation particularly is super important. So I would recommend everyone searching the link or downloading it after the fact and using it as a reference, especially as you begin your studies in the fall. If you have any questions throughout, please go ahead and use the Q&A box to type them in. The session will run for an hour, so we will finish up right at 11, but we'll try and get to as many questions as we can. And if we're not able to answer your question in the allotted time, we'll make sure to give you all of our contact information so you can reach out after the session ends. And you probably already know this if you're participating today, but we are running a ton of webinars every week leading up to the fall semester. So please continue to stay engaged and attend as many of these pre-arrival webinars as you can. We're posting information about the upcoming sessions on our website as usual and on our social media platforms as well. So without further ado, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and I'll hand it over to Joel to kick off the presentation today.
Give me 1 second here to share my screen. Oh, it says host disabled participant screen sharing. That, Laura?
Any changes there?
Yes, perfect. All right. So they can see that now. Are we good?
Perfect.
Awesome. Okay. Well, as Laura shared, I'm going to be talking about a pretty important topic as a new student to Lakehead. Today, I just want to talk to you about how to succeed as a student with academic integrity. And I'm not sure whether you are aware, but as a student, there are expectations for you to behave in a certain way. It's university policy. It's kind of in the fine print, as you become a student of Lakehead, we have a code of conduct that you are responsible for following. Now, this goes for non-academic conduct. So this is kind of how you treat your fellow students, how you treat your professors, how you treat university property, and this goes for online, offline, on campus, just as a student, there's expectations to behave in a certain way. And this code also covers academic conduct as well. So how you behave when it comes to your schoolwork. And this, covers stuff, really anything to do with, material that you're submitting, whether that's, in your writing, papers, lab notes, data collection, tests, examinations, all of these things, anything that you're submitting for a grade falls under the student code of conduct as well. And the university has, taking academic integrity, this topic, much more seriously these days, because right across the board, other, post-secondary institutions, whether that's universities, colleges, the topic of academic integrity has become, a pretty significant topic of discussion just because of access to information and technology and things like that. So Lakehead has taken some pretty significant steps, and we do just want to make sure that we have this conversation, we give you fair warning, and we want to make sure that we're actually setting you up for success, which is the purpose of today's presentation. So let's start here. Let's just first of all, let's actually talk about what academic integrity is. For some of you, this might be a familiar term. For some of you, this might be the first time that you're hearing it. So if I were to ask what academic integrity is, and I were to explain it, I would say that really within the world of academia, there are specific conventions or ways in which things are done. So there's kind of some rules and shared practices. And these can differ between particular fields of study, but there are basic rules that all professionals and scholars abide by and follow. And the purpose of these rules is to ensure that the work that's produced, the work that these scholars produce, is reliable, that it's trustworthy, and that it's of particular quality. And really, that's what we want to develop in our students. We want to ensure that you understand the rules within your program for your future career, but we also want to make sure that you understand sort of within the rules what's expected of you, and that you behave this way now as a student at Lakehead. We want to make sure that you meet your program requirements and that you earn your degree by following Lakehead's rules. We also just want to acknowledge that we do realize that there are many different cultural interpretations of academic integrity, and that the rules here in Canada, and specifically at Lakehead, may differ from other parts of the world or other institutions. So it is important for you to understand what rules are in place at Lakehead, specifically for our institution. There we go. Often when we ask our students what academic integrity is, they immediately jump to what academic integrity is not, or the things that you shouldn't do as a student, such as cheat on a test, copy someone else's work, or plagiarize material. And while this is all true, we tend we prefer to take a more positive approach to things. We like to focus on the positive values or characteristics that we are all striving for as members of an academic community. So let's bring those up here. The International Center for Academic Integrity defines academic integrity this way. They have 5 key components, and these key components or characteristics are honesty, fairness, trust, respect, and responsibility. And your job as a student is to take these principles and with wisdom and with courage, apply them to the various situations that you're going to encounter during your academic career here at Lakehead. And it all really comes down to this. A degree from Lakehead is a respected credential, and we need to protect this. And so Lakehead expects all members of our university community to share in the responsibility of upholding our academic standards by familiarizing yourself with and following our rules. So the remainder of this presentation, I'm going to unpack this a little bit more, like what these expectations are. I'm going to cover topics just such as academic writing and plagiarism, which is a big one, citation styles, cheating, working in groups, and then the Lakehead University Student Code of Conduct. So let's start by talking about academic writing and plagiarism. And this is probably one of the violations to our Student Code of Conduct that people seem to have the most difficult time with. We realize that when you start as a student at the university, you're not just jumping in with this perfect ability to write academically, and there is a learning curve. So often what happens is students who are in that process of learning how to write academically, there's some pitfalls or things that they have trouble with. They get them into some trouble with regards to violating our Student Code of Conduct. So when you begin writing in an academic context, you inevitably end up using or referring to material produced by someone else. And anytime that you use something that someone else has created, you must give credit to that person or that source. And a big part of academic integrity is, and following its rules, is clearly acknowledging the work of other people. If you don't properly give credit to any words or ideas or information that you've borrowed from other sources, it appears to your reader, so let's say your professor, when they're reading a paper that you produced, if you don't properly give credit to the source, it appears as if you're presenting it as your own thoughts or ideas or material. And we call this plagiarism. And plagiarism is a violation of our Student Code of Conduct. Now, some of you might be familiar with the term plagiarism, and for some of you, maybe this is the first time you're hearing it today. It's kind of a newer concept. So I'd like to just take a minute and unpack this a little bit more and explain more clearly what plagiarism is. Whenever you take someone else's words to use in your own paper, we call this a quotation. The quotation needs to be within quotation marks around the words that you actually took from the source. And you must actually, after the quotations, you must also use parentheses to acknowledge where you took the quote from and who said it. Okay, so this is called a citation. We'll talk a little bit more about this in a second. Because there are different citation styles, and we're not going to be able to get into all those today, but I just want to, I guess, explain a few of the different components of a proper citation, because it is really important to avoid plagiarism. When we're speaking specifically of quotations, and I've got an example up here on the screen, this would be maybe an example of if I just were to ask you right now to write a brief paragraph on, sort of what you're looking forward to, what are you excited about when, starting as a new student at Lakehead. And you might write a sentence like this, where you say, Lakehead University is supposed to be a great school, and I'm really looking forward to studying there. And what are you basing that comment off of? In the following sentence, you say, a student affairs worker shared that it was, quote, the best experience of his life. And this is Simmons 2020, and that's me quoting myself. So then we finish the sentence. So I'm eagerly awaiting my time of study there. Okay, so this would be an example of a quote. You're quoting me directly, and then in the parentheses there, you're explaining where you got that quote from. You got it from Joel Simmons in 2020. Now, to mention this, that quotes within academic writing should be used sparingly. You shouldn't use them very often. Typically, you only quote something directly when the exact wording is really important. And if you change the quote, then it loses its significance. Usually, the expectations is that you put things in your own words. So when you put things in your own words, we call this either paraphrasing or summarizing. And I should mention that when you put things in your own words, this doesn't mean copying things from the internet, copying and pasting from the internet, kind of doing the right click thing, and you copy and paste into your Word document, and then you use the thesaurus option to sort of find some different synonyms. You change a few words here and there, you move around the order, so it looks as if you wrote something yourself. But you're supposed to actually conduct proper research where you read, various books and articles and journals, maybe watch some videos, you collect all the information, and then you make sure that you understand what all the authors are saying, and then you actually present it by paraphrasing or summarizing, and you put it into your own words. Now, there's a slight difference between paraphrasing and summarizing, and I'll explain that now. You can see it on your screen. Paraphrasing is essentially when you rewrite and explain a passage of text in your own words. So you can kind of take a sentence of an author, and then you kind of think about what they're actually saying. And then, like I said, without kind of copying and pasting anything, you just sit down at your keyboard and you think about, well, how would I explain this in my own words? And you sit down and you write it all out. Summarizing is a little bit different. This is when you kind of take let's say an entire article, an overarching theme in a book, for example, and then you really briefly summarize the entire piece of work. So there's a slight difference between those two. But in both cases, both with paraphrasing and summarizing, you still are required to give credit to the source, even though you put it in your own words. So whether it's quoting directly, like I said, in quotation marks, paraphrasing, or summarizing, you still have to give credit because it wasn't something that you created on your own. Even though you wrote it in your own words, you're still relying on information from someone else. So if we're striving for good academic writing, and good academic writing is kind of the opposite of plagiarism. So we're striving for this goal of being able to write academically and develop these skills. Good academic writing, I would describe as when you engage in the academic conversation. So other authors, other researchers sharing information together. There's a conversation essentially going on. So it's when you engage in that conversation by presenting your own ideas or arguments in your own words, primarily, in a way that clearly connects with the work of other authors and the broader conversation. So that's what you're striving for. And we realize it's this, ongoing process where you develop this skill. You're not going to have it right away. Something else I should mention, we're primarily talking about academic writing and citations, but citations are also required for things like artwork or music. So if you borrow artwork or music, or if you're in the science field, if you borrow graphs or tables, or if you're in the computer science stream of things, if you're borrowing code, that's a whole other animal in itself, but there's specific ways that you have to acknowledge the work of other coders. And something that actually catches students by surprise often is the fact that you sometimes have to cite your own work. And let me just explain this a little bit. If you were to take a paper, for example, and resubmit it in another course, so you submitted a paper, it was graded, and then you have a similar topic and you resubmit it again, and your reader doesn't know this, this is actually called self-plagiarism. So even if you reuse your own material, you still have to cite it and disclose that it's reused. And I would say before you consider reusing any of your own work, it's a good idea to talk with your instructor ahead of time. You need to determine whether it's appropriate to reuse something, because often when an instructor gives you an assignment, the idea is to generate something new. So it's a good idea to talk to them beforehand before submitting it for another course. So kind of in summary here, when it comes to academic writing and plagiarism, when you're writing, you really do have to make sure that you put things in your own words by paraphrasing or summarizing. If you use an exact quote, make sure you put it in quotations. And then anything that you're borrowing, right, whether it's words, ideas, graphs, images, and so on, you need to make sure that you're citing those things so the reader knows where it came from, or else it's considered plagiarism and it can get you into some trouble, which we'll talk about in a second. Something that I just wanted to briefly touch on here is citations, because I've been using that word. You have to cite it. You have to use a citation. Some of you might not know what that is. A citation is essentially when you make reference or give credit to the original source from which you borrowed. And there are different citation styles depending on what sort of field of study you're in, what program you're in. They use a different citation style, which I won't have time to get into, but there's some great resources for you to look into in the future. The most important thing is understand that there's two components to every citation. First, there is the in-text citation. And in my example of you writing a paragraph about your expectations for starting as a new Lakehead student, you saw that I had the Simmons 2020. So I would say here that, the sky is very bright today, Joel 2020. If that was within the body of a text, that would be an in-text citation. So as you, the reader, would know where that idea or that thought or that quotation came from. Typically, in-text citations are noted either by something in parentheses like you see here, or sometimes it's a small superscript number with some abbreviated information included later on. The second Second component of a citation is the last page of your assignment, which lists all of the resources, all of the sources of research that you used for your paper. Depending on what citation style is used, this can either be called a references page or a works cited page or a literature cited page, and it's just essentially a list of all the different citations. So the reader can see, okay, Joel 2020 said this, and then they could actually go to the last page of your paper, and they could see the full information. Okay, well, who's Joel? What's his last name? What journal article did this occur in? What was the date of that article? What page number was it on? And so they can actually, your reader can go back to the original source and find that, and they can read it for themselves. So it's sort of like this rabbit trail where they can connect all of your points that you're referencing, and they can go back to the original source, make sure that what you actually quoted is true, and it was a proper representation of that information. So I just mentioned that, as I said, there are different citation styles depending on what course you're taking, what discipline it belongs to. So if you're an English major, if you're in an English course, the reference style might be MLA style. If you're an engineer, then you might be using IEEE. Other common styles of citation include, APA, Chicago, Turabian. There's a whole list. And if you're planning on publishing at any point down the road, usually the journal that you're publishing in may even have their own citation style of their own. And if you're uncertain at any point in time within any of your courses what citation style you should use for the course, it's really important that you talk to your professor or your teaching assistant, or you could probably find out that information sort of in the course outline or the course syllabus. It would likely state that there. And then once you know what citation style you're supposed to use, you may need some help getting familiar with how to actually properly cite using that style. And if that's the case, if you're having some trouble, which it does take some time to learn, I would encourage you to talk to the staff at the Academic Support Zone. They've got some great resources there, and even in LU International, you can talk to any of their advisors and they'll direct you to the right support. So what about, so we've talked primarily just about plagiarism and citing, and how plagiarism, if you don't get proper citation, would be considered a violation of our student code of conduct. Let's just talk about a broader category, which we would maybe kind of broadly call cheating. This is probably the most common word that comes to mind when we talk about violations or breaches of academic integrity. Most students understand that we kind of go quote unquote, no pun intended, that cheating, meaning breaking the rules, is obviously a violation of the student code of conduct. But what happens is, even though we kind of all know that cheating in its various forms is not appropriate, every term there are students that still, for various reasons, whether it's like they're overloaded with work, they're not great at managing their time, just there's a lot of stress and expectations. We do have students that attempt to cheat. They end up getting caught, and it doesn't end well because the academic stakes, their academic risks are pretty high. If you ever get caught cheating, there could be significant disciplinary action taken, and we'll talk about that at the end of the session when we look at the Lakehead University Student Code of Conduct. But I just wanted to talk about just some various types of cheating, because like I said, it's a broad category. So what do we actually consider cheating in the Student Code of Conduct? First, and probably the most common, is possession or use of unauthorized materials. So this would happen when a student has in their possession or uses material such as a cheat sheet or some type of page with the answers on it. But now in the digital age, it could be a student who has their cell phone, for example, or a smartwatch or some sort of other electronic aid during a test or an examination, and where they're able to access information that they're not supposed to access. So that's sort of a broad definition of what possession or use of unauthorized materials would be. But it also counts if a student were to access an exam, for example, from an exam bank that's not approved by the professor. So it's out there. There are sources where you can kind of, type it into Google and look for exams or tests or whatever that's sort of on a specific subject, and all of a sudden you get the answers. That sort of behavior is considered cheating because it's possession of unauthorized material because your professor hasn't approved you have that material. Another form of cheating is what we call unauthorized collaboration. So this is when students share answers either with each other during a test or an examination. You know, you kind of turn to the person next to you, which I guess by Zoom, or if it's all happening digitally, it could be you've got the person on your phone or on another window, and you're talking to them during an examination. Typically, working together or collaborating in the context of the test or an examination is considered cheating, because examinations, both online and in person, are supposed to be individual assessments, and they're not supposed to be you know, a collaborative effort or where you work together with other students. It's supposed to be something that you do on your own. And this is the case for most assignments as well. And this is sometimes where students get into trouble, is if students work together on an assignment, especially when they've been instructed or it's been assumed to complete the assignment on their own, but if they work together to complete the assignment, then it would be considered unauthorized collaboration, because you're collaborating and it wasn't allowed. The third type of cheating that I wanted to discuss is falsification. So this means, I guess the most common example would be if someone else claimed to be you during an examination, or you claim to be somebody else. This is sort of getting into the realm of using a proxy, so impersonating to be someone else or someone else impersonating you. This is considered cheating and a violation of the Student Code of Conduct. And then the last one I'll mention too is facilitation. And facilitation is one that I think a lot of students don't necessarily think about. And this has to do more with enabling someone else to cheat. So if you happen to provide someone else with your material, whether it's a lab report, maybe you lent it to a friend or shared with a friend, and they just took it, copied and pasted it, put their name on it, and submitted it, you could actually get in trouble for facilitating plagiarism or cheating. Yeah, so this is, you know, something else to watch out for. So if you're ever, you know, working together with you know, friends, or you're studying together, and someone asks you for your essay or your test answers or anything like that, be very cautious, because if they use it to cheat, then you could actually be on the line as well for enabling that type of behavior. So these four types of cheating are by no means a complete list. So what I'd like to encourage our students to do is to think about cheating in this way. Does what you're doing give you an unfair advantage over your fellow students? So I'll say that again. So does what you're doing give you an unfair advantage over your fellow students? And if it does, if whatever you're doing is kind of giving you that edge or that more competitive advantage that your other fellow students don't have, then it could be considered cheating and a violation of the Academic Integrity Code. So I do just want to say that I acknowledge that there are real pressures. You know, students face all sorts of pressures, whether it's financial pressures, time restraints, just feeling overwhelmed with, you know, being a student and all that is expected of you. I caution you, just when you think about the explanations here of what cheating actually is, it's really important that you just seek help, get some assistance. We've got lots of resources available, and I think some of these other Monday meetups are going to explain what the other kind of supports that we have at Student Affairs and Lakehead University International. We've got a lot of help out there for you, whether that's the Student Success Center, helping you, you know, with your organizational skills development, time management coaching. There's free tutoring available, peer study groups that we have, writing support. There's a whole bunch of resources available to you at Lakehead to help you avoid plagiarism and cheating. One of the things that I wanted to just switch to right now, this is sort of just to start to wrap things up. When we're talking about academic integrity here at Lakehead, one of the most important documents that I want to mention is the Student Code of Conduct, Academic Integrity, or the Academic Integrity Code for short. Not only does this document kind of clearly explain the academic expectations that we have for all of our students, but this document also, you know, covers key information such as what behavior qualifies as a violation of academic integrity, what does the process look like if you are suspected of violating the code, what penalties and sanctions can be implemented if you are caught plagiarizing or cheating, and then lastly, the Student Code of Conduct explains your rights as a Lakehead student. So it would include things like your right to be heard, your right to have a fair investigation process, your right to a support person, and the right to appeal a decision, just kind of to name a few things there. There are two ways that you can access the Student Code of Conduct. If you go to the Lakehead University website and you're to type in student code or Student Code of Conduct, you can also just go to students and student life. Under the student life page, there's a Student Code of Conduct web page. It has our academic integrity code there. It also includes the non-academic and our appeals policy as well. Or you can go to the policies and procedures library on the website, and there's the 3 policies there as well. But one of the things that I wanted to mention is that when you open the document, and I would say you should probably check it out because you are responsible for being familiar with this policy. But one of the things that we hear from our students, and this is a reality, is that it is a very lengthy document, and it can be a little bit intimidating. So what we've done is we've created some additional materials for you that summarize the contents and make it a little bit more user-friendly. So I'm not sure if you can see my cursor here, but if you look at the student life page, on the left-hand side under student conduct, there's the tabs there. There's a resources section, and I would encourage you at the very least to go and check out the resources section. And under the resources section, we have basically a one-pager that kind of explains what you're responsible for as far as behavior academically. So I would encourage you at the very least, like I said, to check that out, as you are expected to abide by and adhere to our policy when it comes to when it comes to our code. One of the things that if I was to mention a couple of things that I want you to take home today, first thing I would want you to know is that and to understand that if you were to be accused of breaching the academic integrity code, you're automatically I guess, engaged in a formal investigation process. So anytime there's a suspected breach of academic integrity, there is automatically a formal process that's initiated. This does not mean that you are guilty. This does not mean that you're going to get a 0 or fail your course or get expelled from school. But what this formal process actually does mean is that you are guaranteed a fair and consistent and documented process of investigation. So while we realize, with students when they do go through this process, and hopefully none of you are going to have this problem or have to be investigated for academic integrity violations, but if it were to happen, we realize that that process is very formal and can be a little bit intimidating and scary. But it does mean, I guess what I'm trying to say here is we realize that it's a scary process, but the formal process is actually to our students' benefit. Each student is entitled to provide their side of the story and be heard, and to provide a little bit of a background. So let's say you're accused of plagiarizing. You have the ability to sit down with your professor and talk through it. And it's not considered disrespectful to your professors at all. It is worked into our policies. It's this process that's standardized that every student would go through if they're accused of plagiarism. You get to provide an explanation. You get to talk through it with your professor. And like I said, in some cultures, I can see that being a sign of disrespect, but at Lakehead, with the way that we have it set up, it's not. As long as it's obviously done with an appropriate way, like you're speaking respectfully to the professor and talking through things, providing your side of the story. That's what's expected. The second thing I want you to know is while we do try to give our students second chances, and we realize, like I said, it's a learning process, and we want our students to learn from their mistakes, there are still significant consequences for violating the code. If, for example, you're caught plagiarizing, we'll use that as an example again, you could get a formal warning, which would kind of be on the low end of the spectrum. You might have a chance to resubmit your assignment. Maybe the resubmit of your assignment is at a reduced mark. And that's if your professor is really wanting to work closely with you. But you also could get a 0 completely on that assignment. If there's plagiarized material in there, if you didn't cite something properly and you copied another student's work, you could get a 0 on the assignment, or you could even get a 0 on a reduced mark in the course. Typically when students are caught cheating, for example, on examinations, often a consequence or a sanction in those cases would be a 0 on the exam. like a complete 0 on the exam, or it could show up as a 0 on the course as well, which ends up being indicated on your transcript as academic misconduct, which is a pretty big deal. And then there are extreme cases, especially if there's been significant repeat offenses where students are suspended or expelled. It all depends on the nature of the violation. But the point here is this: when you kind of look at the sanction gradient and sort of escalating degrees of sanctions, is that it's not worth it. We want to encourage our students to be very careful when you're writing to avoid plagiarism, and definitely steer clear of anything that qualifies as gaining an unfair advantage over your fellow students, because it could be considered cheating. I've mentioned a couple times that we realize that there are very real challenges for our students, and with that realization, we want to make sure that our students are successful. So on the screen here are a few helpful tools that I think would make a big difference if you were to make note of those, or like I said, go back and watch this video later on, and check out these resources. Something that's not listed here is, right away I'll say our professors and our TAs are very approachable. We are a small, very accessible institution. So if you have any questions, reach out to your professor and your teaching assistant first. At least start there. We have our Ask Librarian services. So this is a live chat that you can connect with an Ontario University librarian, ask them questions about citations and things like that. An outside source that I sometimes refer students to is the Purdue University Online Writing Lab. It's a great resource. Definitely talk to the Academic Support Zone through the Lakehead University Student Success Center. And then Zotero, you may or may not be familiar with this tool, but there's a couple of other apps or software that are similar to Zotero. But the university, this is the one that we sort of promote actively. And this tool is basically, whenever you're writing a paper or researching a paper, it's a way to organize all of your resources and make it really easy with the click of a button. You choose your citation style, whether it's MLA or APA, click on the citation style, and then it actually produces the literature cited or the works cited or references page at the end. So it makes it a lot easier, so you don't end up spending hours trying to properly create a references cited page at the end and get some information wrong. Just pulls it together really nicely, helps you collect all that information really well. There also is the AWARE course. This is still active. We are reworking this for the fall of 2020. So there's a new program that will be Academic Integrity Matters, or AIM. That'll be launched towards the end of August. But currently, if you want to just look into some other resources, this is a self-registration. You go on my course link through the Lakehead University website, log in, go to the self-registration section. The AWARE course covers academic writing and academic integrity content, videos, YouTube videos, some quizzes and stuff like that. Some professors actually require you to do this as part of your course, for example. So I would encourage you to check that out as well. And yeah, I'm trying to be mindful of time here. I do want to make sure that we're allowing some time for questions. So if I guess at any point in time now, Laura, what you want to pull up some of the questions that students included in the Q&A? I'd love to answer any questions.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Joel, for your presentation. And I just want to reinforce how important this information is for all students to be aware of. As a student of Lakehead, as Joel mentioned, you are expected to know these policies and guidelines. And as an international student advisor, over the years, I've seen, many students that have been accused of plagiarism or cheating when they didn't really know that they were cheating or, plagiarizing in a paper or research essay. So it is a requirement of being a student at Lakehead. And yeah, I just want to thank you again, Joel, for your presentation. The content is super important for everyone to know. We have had a couple questions come in privately. So the first one is, how can I access the AWARE course module, and is it mandatory to do before I begin classes?
Okay. Yeah, so I sort of touched upon this just towards the end of the presentation here. If you were to go on the Lakehead website, where it lists off my email, my info, my course link, if you go to my course link, and in that there is a section that is called self-registration, or yeah, I mean, there's also a link on our student conduct page. So if you were to go to the student conduct page and click on resources, like at the beginning of the presentation, there's step-by-step instructions on how to actually register for the AWARE course. Now, I'll say this, it's not mandatory. Some professors do actually work it into their course syllabus and make it a requirement, but institutionally, or institution-wide, it's not a requirement, and it's not a requirement before you start as a student. However, because Laura and myself have both indicated there is so much at stake and it is so important, we do really hope that our students will engage with some of this material, become more familiar with it, because there is a lot at stake. Like Laura was referring to, students who might have plagiarized without even realizing, because there's different practices from the institution that you're coming from, coming into Lakehead. There are differences there. Sometimes students will plagiarize without even knowing it. Unfortunately, saying I didn't know any better isn't a valid excuse to kind of get out of it. And then the student ends up getting, like I said, a 0 on that assignment. It could be a pretty significant paper or something that you submitted, and that causes you to fail the course that you're enrolled in, which we don't want to see that happen. So I would encourage you to check that out. Like I said, my course link, self-register for the course. There's 9 modules. You go through the content for the modules. There's some material that you would read, some videos, and then quizzes that go along with those. And if your instructor is requiring you to do that to get a certificate to show that you've completed the AWARE course, you have to get 90% on each of the modules to show that you've understood the material. I will just say this again, that AWARE course is being replaced by a new course towards the end of the summer that's going to be called AIM. You'll register for it the same as the AWARE course. The idea with the new content is that it's going to be a little bit more user-friendly, condensed, that you won't have to spend 4 to 5 hours completing it. It'll be something that you complete in like a half an hour to an hour. And the quiz questions are going to be a little bit more straightforward, because the feedback that we've got from students over the years is that it is a little bit more confusing. It really tests your understanding of material, and we don't want to make it needlessly difficult for our students. We just want to make sure that you understand what's appropriate and what's not. So the new course should be, it's like I said, it's almost completed now, and it should be a great thing to check out. So that will likely be what our instructors will start requiring their students to do for their coursework.
Awesome. So I'm going to jump in with another question. We had a question come in asking for more clarification on where to go for help with citation support. So Joel's provided a lot of those different resources. He talked about the Student Success Center with the Academic Support Zone, which is listed on this slide here, the Ask the Ontario Librarian Services. Lakehead also has some resources on our Lakehead University Library website. Specifically, there's a citation help section where you can learn about how to use citation for APA style, MLA, Chicago, lots of different links there. So what I'm going to do is post a few different links in the chat so that hopefully those of you who are watching right now can click on those links directly. And a great suggestion would be to bookmark those in your favorite browser right now so that they're easily accessible. You could start reading them right away. And then they're always there too once you start your semester and get going on your coursework. But just to reiterate everything that Joel has said and Laura has said already, prevention and education is definitely key. And this is a great set of skills to learn, not just for your first year of university, but it's going to be used all throughout your degree. And especially if you go on to graduate school or any kind of postgraduate work, all of this information is going to be extremely useful for you. So the sooner you get a good grasp and understanding of this material, the more successful you're going to be throughout your university career. So I will go ahead and post some of those links right now.
Yeah, Katie, what I'll say is actually, if you go to lakeheadu.ca/student conduct, in that resources section, I do actually have quick links to all of these. So it's sort of like a one-stop shop for all of these resources. So if you want to, instead of giving 4 or 5 different links, if you just want to give that one link to the resources page, that's where I would encourage students to go. Because it also, like I said, it has our policies and the one pager that sort of summarizes the policy a little bit more in a more user-friendly way. It's a good spot to keep referring our students back to the student conduct.
Okay, that sounds great.
That's where we'll be updating all of our information as well.
Awesome, thank you.
Perfect. So we did have another question come in, and it asked, if I'm accused of plagiarism or cheating, will this automatically go on my student record?
Yeah, so I sort of alluded to that a little bit back here. If you kind of see the different levels of sanctions or consequences, disciplinary action is maybe another way of putting it. If you are accused of plagiarism and your instructor or the dean uh, upholds that allegation, like they find that it's more likely that you plagiarized than to have written the material yourself. Um, there's a whole slew of sort of outcomes as I was discussing earlier. It's only if you get a 0 on your course or above that. So basically mark of 0 on the course and up to suspension, expulsion, rescission of degree. Those more extreme ones, those would show up on your actual academic record on your transcript. The sanctions that are below the mark of 0 in the course, so whether that was reduction in your course grade, when you're given a formal warning, reduction in the mark of the assignment or whatever, or even if you're given a mark of 0 on that assignment, those things do not go on your formal academic record. However, we do have a database for academic integrity cases, and the purpose of this database is to track if a student is repeatedly having issues with plagiarism. So let's say in your first year course, you get accused for plagiarism, your professor gives you a warning that doesn't show up on your academic record. You do the AWARE course or the AIM course, talk about it and make sure that you understand. Sometimes we refer students to the Student Success Center as sort of a sanction as well, to make sure that they are really understanding the concepts very thoroughly. But if there's a second violation or a third violation, right, where you can't say, well, I didn't know it was plagiarism because you already went through this whole process, then it's likely to escalate the sanctions, and then you maybe get into a situation where you get a mark of 0 on the course, and that is permanently on your record. So, like I said, we do want to be developmental in our approach. We do try to work with our students and help them really understand concepts, but it is quite serious. So, like I said, it doesn't show up on your record unless you get a mark of 0. However, we do keep a database of all cases upheld academic integrity breaches on file in the Student Affairs Office. But that's separate from your academic record.
Okay, that's good to know. Thanks so much for the clarification, and I know we're definitely looking forward to the new AWARE model. It sounds like it will be more concise and more accessible for students. So if you're really eager and keen to read more about academic integrity, you can go ahead and revisit the old module, but I think you said it would be available probably late August, Joel, is that the plan?
Yeah, the video material is going to be done mid-July, and then the course should be launched into August. We don't have an actual hard launch date yet, but it will be before the fall term, so likely in August.
Wonderful, and we'll make sure the International Student Services Department gets that information out to all students once it's finalized, because it is really important and I think would be very helpful to complete before you arrive or when you're just starting classes, so it's fresh in your mind. So I don't believe we have any other questions coming in. So I think that brings us to the end of today's session. So thank you so much for attending today. If you do have any questions afterwards, please feel free to email us. We'll just type our contact information in the chat. You can always reach out if you need assistance or you have any inquiries. I know we did see a couple questions come through related to admission related things, so just feel free to contact us and we'll put you in touch with the right supports to answer your question as soon as we can. So I'd like to thank Joel and Katie again for joining me today. Thanks again to Joel for the amazing presentation, really good information there. And I hope that all of you learned a little bit more about academic integrity. Great, well, thank you so much. And I hope everyone has a great day.